So you did the choosing for the topics we study on this weekend, and coming in number 4, and in something which really I wanted to have the chance to talk about anyway, is this topic of being a good friend. It's a good thing to finish off with on the retreat because, well, even if we try to avoid it, sometimes our thoughts are drifting back to life after the retreat. And generally, if a person has experienced some sort of happiness from meditation themselves, then there's an inclination to want to share it with other people. And the question arises in people's mind how it may be effective to do that and not lead you to embarrassment or becoming frustrated with the whole of the rest of the world. So we have this topic called a good friend, which means not just being a friend, but being the sort of person who exerts an influence on the people around them, which brings out the best in them. Yeah. And we might come across this concept in 3 different perspectives. Firstly, there's a sense in which we maybe started out on this path in the first place because we met up with someone who was a good friend to us. And I think if you look back into your own history of taking up meditation, you can probably find someone there who was influential in your first few impressions of meditation or the whole community surrounding it. Yeah? So we have been befriended by someone who was a good friend at one stage or other. And it's actually one of the most influential influences on our sort of spiritual path. The other aspect of this is how we might influence other people around us. So the sense in which we can be a good friend to other people, help them out when they are seeking for some sort of guidance in this respect. And maybe a little bit harder to understand, being a good friend to yourself. So maybe listening to the good side of your conscience talking when that need arises. People who are good friends, they are quite hard to find, because most people in the world consider friendship to be rather more of a superficial quality. Some people count up the number of friends they have on Facebook, and they feel quite proud of that, like they are somehow a popular person because they got friends which are more than 10 or something like that. But I heard someone had some research that the more friends you have on Facebook, the less you have in reality. Yeah, well, we only have virtual friends. But yeah, that's beside the point. Some people think a person who can influence you must mean that they are an educated person. But often it's not the level of intellect which really makes a difference in this case. Certainly, to be a good friend, you need to have some sort of intelligence, but it may not be the sort of intelligence that we talk about in the school system. So it may be quite a humble person, or a person of quite humble origins may be more influential on the people around them than maybe some professor in an ivory tower, because it comes down to people's habits rather than their credentials. The Buddha talked about the influence of the good friend. And there was a conversation between the Buddha and his secretary. Do you know who the Buddha's secretary was? Wow, very good. Ananda, who's a monk who was enlightened too. But sometimes he asked questions, maybe just to make a point. And he was conversing with the Buddha, and he said, I think that having a good friend is pretty important. And the Buddha said something like, oh, you would be right there. And he said, I reckon that a good friend probably is about half of the influence on whether you become a good person or not. And the Buddha said, oh, I wouldn't put it that lightly. I would say it is the whole influence on you becoming a good person. So although we may think in this individualistic society that we become a good person just because of our choices, or because we are lucky, or we got good credentials or whatever, it's actually down to the influence of the people around us, according to the Buddha, completely. So a huge potential. But such people are hard to find. So if ever you come across someone who comes up to these specifications, then we should, even if they chase us away, we should still try and associate with them, because a lot of good stuff will brush off on us if we have some chance to learn from them. So we can look at this from the point of view of, yes, we want to meet up with someone like that. The other way of looking at it is, what are the qualities of ourselves if we want to become a person like that? So you can look at it from two points of view. The classic qualities of a good friend are described in the scriptures. And you notice that they're not just a friendly person. They're not just a person who goes along with what their friend like, but actually they have a much more proactive influence on the people they regard as their friends. And hence we get 7 qualities. I'll go through them first quickly, and then we could go through in more detail. Said that a person who is a good friend should be endearing. Not only that, but apart from being kind, they may need to be cruel occasionally, command respect from other people. There should be someone who has this sense of reputation, being a praiseworthy person. A good reputation, that is. They should be skilled in the way they use conversation to affect other people. So being able to talk with a purpose in mind. Not only that, they know when to shut up and listen to the other person. Often these two skills are not found together. When it comes to deep topics, they are able to explain them. And although they may encourage people to do good things, they don't just encourage people to do things randomly. So people don't have this doubt in their mind, oh, next week they're going to encourage me to do something which is bad for me. That should not enter the mind of the people who know them. So an endearing person, we all know about being endearing. Human beings, on the face of it, look like pretty nice sort of creatures. Well, there's a lot about human beings that are not too beautiful or elegant. All the things that we hide away. And manners, no matter what culture you're in, tend to advise you about the sides of yourself which are better kept private. Someone influential once said, there's not much that comes out of a human being that is very nice, apart from the goodness that they do. As you think about whether it's liquid, solids, or gases that come out of human beings, there's none of those which are particularly endearing. So we tend to try to make a good impression by making sure that the things which other people see from us are only the good things. Being helpful is also a way to build up this endearing emotional bank account we quoted earlier. To be helpful to a person, you need to understand what they need. Some people don't even get that far, So it's a sense of understanding what a person is missing out on, maybe what you can help with in that respect. And if you have enough of this endearing quality, people want to be around you, even without your saying anything. Often I think of these old folks. Really, old folks are not particularly sort of beautiful to look at, but some old folks have this sort of charisma where people just want to be around them. They want to pat their hand and be close by Granny, Yeah. Oh, well, maybe we have an example right here. Some people have it. I don't know what you do if you don't have that, but maybe it's manners and helpfulness would be good. But maybe ask yourself about those ones who you do feel that sort of thing about. What makes them so? Often it's old people. They have a kind word, because the mouth is still quite active, even though the rest of them is not. And the quality to look for probably is that of loving kindness. So you have to be nice to people if they're going to like you. To put it another way, you have to be accepted by other people before you can teach them anything. You can't. No one's going to accept your advice if they don't trust you, for example. So you have to get in with those people first before you can go to another step where you might be able to teach them something. On the other side, there's this sense of not just being nice to people, but also them looking up to you in some sense and respecting what you have to say to them. It's not really something you can enforce. It's something you need to earn. You need to earn that respect somehow. Some people make the mistake of thinking that they're going to be liked by the other person if they always go along with what that person wants. But you probably had experience of friends yourself who do stupid things. Maybe they go out and get drunk or something, and then they do really stupid things. So if you are a friend to that person, do you just let them do what they want in that way, or do you look out for them? Does looking out for them mean sometimes you would advise them against what comes easiest to them? In the definition of a good friend, yes. The friend would look out to them and also protect them from themselves if they have a destructive behavior. Sometimes that's not easy, because you always think, well, afterwards are they going to not want to be my friend anymore? So this is a different sort of friendship than we normally think about it being, which is just like, going along, have a nice time together. This is actually protecting and looking out for that person in quite an active way. And this is why we shouldn't forget that sometimes a good friend may be someone of a very different age. Might be someone like a parent is a friend to their children, who really are protecting and looking out for them and educating them. So just because the person who is supposedly our friend is the same age, it doesn't mean that we have to behave the same as them. The thing about reputation, to do with being praiseworthy, it comes down to not being a hypocrite. We might go rushing home from the meditation retreat full of this burning desire to make the whole world meditate like us. And we find that it's not so easy to convince people of things like this. It's not like sort of getting people to watch a certain program on the television. It's not like telling people they should study more math, because if you talk about a neutral subject like that, the people don't look any further than the activity which you are advocating. But the moment you start talking about activities that have some human qualities to them, where you're saying you become a better person if you do this thing, then they start looking at the person talking. And they see, well, are you the better person yet? Because you have to exemplify what you are talking about. If you're not, they say, well, look, you've never seen you meditate in your life. Well, who are you to talk about getting me to meditate? So it actually points the finger back at yourself every time you talk about something which is to do with morality. I've seen it sometimes for things like ecology as well. You say, well, you should be using an electric car by now. Oh, but you're still using a diesel, Sometimes you see it for that as well. But for morality, it certainly is the case. They always look at you, oh, who are you to talk? Going all like high and mighty on us, holier than thou. So, you must be able to exemplify the good deeds you talk about. If you're not sure whether you can really exemplify it, then maybe talk to them about something you can exemplify. So, for example, I can talk to them about anger, but maybe I'm not too good at patience yet. So let's talk about the anger first. Because you have confidence in that. And if you've done really a lot of good things in your life, then people will have a respect for you. Almost like your reputation goes before you. So if it turns out that people don't have that respect for you yet, sometimes you just have to keep doing some more good deeds until one day they do accept that you really are genuine in what you are doing. I'm going quite fast, but we have a short session this time. Mindfulness in speech, that's the whole topic of its own. You may have heard it before even. 5 factors of artful speech. You haven't heard it. Well, there's generally 5 factors for any sort of talk which you give to a person to make it into speech that has real value. And those are, firstly, everything you say should be true. It should be useful for them to know. It should be given in polite language. It should be said at the right time. I've got the last one here. And it should be need more omega-3. I'll come to it in a minute. But when you have the need to criticize somebody, you need more than just 5. You probably know this from your workplace or from people leaving stuff on your desk or whatever. Okay. That generally speaking, it's very hard to find people who like to be criticized. When was the last time you gave people some criticism and they said, "Oh, thank you so much for pointing that out to me. I really value every last word you just told me, and I will take it to heart and practice it, and I will go away right now and make amends. And if there's ever anything else you want to criticize me for in the future, just don't hesitate. Come straight back and give me some more criticism. You don't find this sort of people too often, right? Normally what you get is, well, who are you to talk to me like this? And who are you? Your shoes are scruffy anyway. Okay, what's that got to do with it? Whatever. So there are ways and means. And if you've been in management, you probably know that there are different ways to give criticism. If the direct way doesn't work, then you've got the sort of indirect ways. Directly, okay, you tend to get it thrown back in your face. But it is possible. And if you are their boss, then generally they have to listen to you on principle. But if you're not their boss, then it may be harder. If you can't talk to them directly, then tell someone else who's nearby to that person all about the terrible thing that person's done, and they overhear and they think, oh no, I wish they'd told me that directly. Or you can get someone else to tell them, maybe someone who they respect more than you. Or you can, if they've got a particular topic which they need to know about, you can leave a self-help book on that topic lying around where they're going to find it. So here we go. Our 5 factors are here, luckily for me. True, useful, polite, properly timed, and compassionate. That should be part of every sort of speech which is escapes your mouth, as it were, in a way that will lead to more wholesomeness arising in the world. But if you need to criticize someone, you need to add 2 more factors to those, which are, when you criticize someone, you should smile at the same time. Do you know why you need to do that? Because they will realize that you are telling them this not because you don't like them, but because you don't like what they did. If you look angry, and they think, oh, this person's just angry with me, so they're saying a lot of things because they don't like me and they're insulting me. So they don't really listen to what you're telling them. But if you smile, then they feel, oh, look, they still like me, but they're still telling me this awful thing. So maybe this awful thing is important. I should do something about it. Exactly right. So it tells them, I am telling you this out of compassion for you, because I want you to keep your job, really. And the other thing you may do is to use what's known as sandwiching. You know what sandwiching is? The person is the meat in the sandwich. No, the criticism is the meat in the sandwich. It comes between 2 other things which are nice about them, which are compliments. So, and those compliments need to be genuine. So, okay, you got this guy on your production line, and they are making a real mess of, like, picking fruit which is got blemishes or something on it. So all these fruits with blemishes are getting through quality control. So you go up to the guy, and so basically they are bankrupting your company because of their sloppiness. But you must keep this to yourself. So you say, oh, new haircut. And the guy, new haircut. Oh, and yes, if you had some more time to pick a few more blemished fruit off the production line, that would be really swell. And they say, oh, hey, that wasn't so nice. And the shoes are really cool today. And they say, oh, good, Hang on, what was that about the fruit again? So, like, you start and finish on a good note, and you slip in a little bit of criticism, which is sort of going to affect the bankruptcy of your company in the middle, and you're well away. Yeah, criticism is easy. It's just that you have to really like the hairs and the shoes, otherwise they can tell. Oh, he just made that up. Yeah, so criticism can be hard. It's even harder in a country where face is a big issue. And I understand that in America it's not quite such an issue, but I may be wrong. Yeah, if you cause people to lose face in an Asian country, it can be a big deal. And apparently everyone is open and transparent in the States. So, oh, there you go. You see, it's just a myth. So artful in speech, the person doing the speaking needs to be careful to make their speech into something which is, well, almost sacred.
Regarding artful speech. In Southern California, we have extreme climate weather sometimes, like really hot. So sometimes people come to the temple, but they're not aware, they don't know, that certain clothing is not appropriate. How would you, I get asked to tell people sometimes certain things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to take it. But how would you say something like that, like?
Yeah, I think, well, I've seen they got a sign here, but I think maybe the sign is in the wrong place. It's the sort of thing where you just want to tap the sign and say, how about you read this for yourself? Or maybe have it in a place where they don't need someone to point out the sign to them. It's just like there, the first thing they see when they come in, and that would make more sense. There's temple. If you have been to Thailand, they got these huge signs on the temple, and it's quite funny actually. And lately they started doing it in our temple too. So obviously they've had this problem because people are a little bit sensitive to, like, they've made a lot of effort to like dress in this really flimsy costume, which they've worn to come to the temple on the way to the disco or something. And you tell them that this is just like no good, and they say, "But it took me all morning to dress up like this. You know, there must be something good in it. You know, yeah, but it looks like you're not wearing anything." So yes, maybe they can see the sign, go home, change, come back, and then talk to you. Yeah, it's some things are better sort of. This is like policy, you know. It's not like just what I think. This is like what everyone thinks in this place. So like if you're coming, then prepare and have it on the website before people get here. You know, maybe that would be something good. But there's this tendency to forget to welcome people as well. So like it should be welcome, and then they got this sign with all the temple rules on it. But yeah, it's a lot of trouble. But people should maybe know that when they come to a temple, they need to study first and be prepared to adapt. Mm. Yeah. Mm.
That happens at Shilai Temple a lot as well, especially in the summer, just like you said. And when I've done it, I have sort of an apologetic tone in my voice. Because honestly, it's hot. And people do dress that way out there. And they really might have been on their way to somewhere else. You know, they really usually are. So I say, I'm sorry, but to go into the main shrine, your shoulders need to be covered, so we're going to give you a thing to wear here and a skirt to wrap around. And I just do it sort of apologetically. You know, like, I understand why people dress that way. It just, you can't do it in this room. And I've never gotten any complaints about that. They seem to understand. So I just sort of take their side a little bit.
But it's still kind of like hurts their feelings sometimes.
Yeah. 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 I know. It's an awkward situation.
Yeah, it's there's always a way, but yeah, hopefully you look at the person's face first and see how they're going to take it. Yeah, but empathy sounds good. Now, even these white cloths, you know, it's a big deal sometimes to say, well, why do ladies have them but men don't? You know, this can't be right. You know, it's just like, is this like, you know, it's part of the same country or what, you know? But, you know, men wearing shorts, and they still should cover up their knees, right? And it's like, well, Yeah, it's deeper, a little bit harder to explain than that. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes you need to be flexible, but then you will risk offending all the other people who are regulars. Yeah. So going gradually. You need to meet them halfway sometimes. Listening is important because to learn what people need, you need to listen to them telling you first, and rather than just having the arrogant assumption that you know what everyone wants, which is probably just the same as what you want. So listening to them first. Some people are not happy when you want to be their friend, so they may give you a whole lot of insults. So a person who is a good listener may also need to start off by being a person who can absorb a lot of insults and still smile back. Because after a while, no matter how ingenious that person may be, they will run out of insults. And when they see you don't seem to be taking offense, then they will probably give up. At which point you can start to tell them something. So you wait till they have exhausted their stock of complaints or protests first. Yeah? Yeah. And when they set the dogs on you and throw things at you, after a while they run out of things to throw at you. Well, sometimes it comes to that. People are so keen to avoid your good advice. Dealing with deep topics. Sometimes you can make deep topics easier to understand by using things like metaphors. A lot of things to do with Dharma are actually quite abstract. People live in a world where everything is like visuals. And here you're talking about qualities. You don't have like visuals. So you're going to have to compare it to things which maybe they are familiar with in order for it to make sense. If you know what the person's level of previous knowledge is, then you can build upon that instead of like jumping straight into something they have no connections with. And some people really have, let's say, religious knowledge, that maybe they have no religious background whatsoever. So they're just going to sort of close their ears the moment they hear any religious vocabulary. Whereas other people may have a religious background, you can actually compare them. And if you know that their background well enough, sometimes you can find a lot of common ground. Making difficult concepts easy to understand. For example, let's say you had to explain the law of karma to a farmer. You think, well, farmers, they're not intellectuals. How are they going to understand an abstract concept? But if you explain the law of karma, it's a bit like planting crops. Like they know about planting crops. And if you plant barley, then it grows up into barley plants. If you plant wheat, then it grows up into a wheat plant. You don't get barley plants from planting wheat. In the same way, if you plant bad deeds, then it grows up into bad karma. Good deeds, good karma. You don't get bad karma from planting good deeds. And, you've got this thing where there's a delay as well, between planting it and it growing up into a plant. You need to wait some time. And it's the same thing with the law of karma. You've got a lot to talk about if you know how to connect with what they are expert in. And starting from something that they are interested in rather than what you are interested in or trying to advocate. It needs to be made to be about what is helping them. And I think this often breaks down in the temple way of portraying things to, let's say, Westerners. They forget why Westerners might be interested may not be the same reason they are interested in. For example, my own sort of little dabbling of research into Buddhist identity found out that Westerners think very different from Asian people about why it's important to come to the temple or to hear Buddhist teachings. It turns out that the Asians are very interested to reinforce their sense of identity. But Westerners who come to a temple already have an identity. But the reason they want to hear talks is to get some new ideas. Very different. So they don't want a new identity. They want to hear some new things, like really food for thought, you know. Yeah, there seems to be a different sort of skew, but they meet up in the same temple, possibly for the same activities. But the reason they're there is different. So you need to know what they are interested in. You know, what is their suffering that they want to overcome that suffering. And yeah, not being misunderstood. Don't send mixed messages. Oh, let's all go down to the temple this week. Next week, let's all go down to the disco. You know, for a change. So instead of getting the message, this person is leading me to do many good things in my life, you get the message that this person just encouraged me to do anything they are doing. So one tries to not only be a good example to others, but not to send mixed messages that you're just an encouraging person. And one thing to avoid particularly is what's known, this group of things called the roads to ruin, which you know all about, right? A category of activities which one would try to shun. That's one of them, but there's more. Looks like I need to come back. It's things like gambling and what's known as roaming the streets at unseemly hours, which means mostly the streets of the red light district. Yeah. So that gambling, laziness, having bad company, things that are a slippery slope towards sort of, you know, a downturn in your quality of life. Drinking is in there too, but it's the only one that's also in the precepts. But this is a group sort of economically exploitative things that are also addictive. Yeah, so try and don't encourage people. Oh, and sports and entertainment can be in this category too, if taken to excess. Not playing them, just watching them.
So like, not anytime soon will any Buddhist organization have like an event in Vegas.
They do?
No, I'm saying. It would be like not doing that at all, right? 'Cause that's what not.
Yeah, I think that would be a mixed message.
Right, okay.
Yeah. I hear a lot of companies just use it as a conference center, but I guess that it's sort of, it makes it an attractive venue for certain sorts of people. Yeah, I think we would have it in a forest. Yeah, where you don't need to sort of suspect that there's going to be a casino around the corner. Yeah. Sometimes before you can really be a good friend to other people, you need to start with something closer to home, which is being a good friend to yourself. And often it only becomes extremely obvious when you start trying to be this sort of well-meaning good friend to other people and you fail, that actually you start reflecting on yourself why you don't have that certain something yet, which is enough to be convincing to other people. And it's not just because you're not good at talking or whatever, but it's actually because something within you is not quite steadfast enough to really to ring true when you're talking to other people. That tells you you need to go back and do your homework in being a better friend to yourself. And the little angel and devil thing is because we have two voices in our head, maybe more, and we also have a choice of which one to listen to. The one you listen to more will start to predominate, So the idea of being a good friend to yourself is to spend more time listening to the little angel, the exclusion of the little devil. And one day that becomes your habit. Meditating regularly for yourself, this is a really good, important part of being a good friend to yourself. And it's something I hope you will do even once the retreat has finished. But you take your good experiences home and practice them further. And that way you maintain the benefits which you built up for yourself in more intensively over the weekend. As for being a good friend to others, now there are many forms this can take. Just to give an example, it might mean, for example, encouraging them to share in making a donation. That's one thing you might, which might be an example of being a good friend to other people. Might be encouraging them to give up drinking. Might be talking a person down off a ledge when they're going to throw themselves over it. Yeah, you would know how good you are put in that situation. Choosing your words carefully. The trouble is that without influences like your own, most people never think to do something of any great virtue of their own inclination. There's just so much noise around us which is encouraging us to do things which are not in that category, that there's very little space left for anyone to do the right thing. It's mostly all sponsored by someone who's getting a profit out of it somewhere. Also, there's a lot of effort invested in doing really bad things in the world. And most people are completely unashamed to encourage people to do bad things. They don't think twice about, excuse me, how about we go bungee jumping, or, go out and shoot small animals in the forest, wow, what a lark. People don't feel at all, ashamed of that sort of thing, and yet they feel quite embarrassed about getting people to do quite sort of positive things with their lives. Yeah, it's a strange sort of imbalance which we observe in society. Furthermore, quite a lot of people are willing to take huge risks to do really sort of awful things in their lives as well. They take risks with intoxicants which are, unheard of years ago, and at quite a young age as well. You get teenagers admitted with liver disease and stuff, just how much have they have drunk to get to that sort of state before they're even 20 years old. It's just like weird times we're living in. People are willing to risk themselves on that sort of level for things which are of no obvious value whatsoever. So it's fairly clear that you're up against quite a lot if you are pulling in the opposite direction. You're seen as quite a unique sort of person if you are encouraging them in a different direction. So yes, there is a big challenge there, and people might be forgiven for thinking what you're doing is strange, but later they would appreciate it. And last but not least, I would just like to leave you that it's not easy to be a good friend if it's not obvious just from your efforts. You'll probably start to find out when you ever try to say some encouraging things to encourage others to do good deeds. What you discover, first of all, is that you can't always help everybody, despite your great intentions. Some people are a bit beyond help. Generally, it tends to be people who don't want to help themselves at all. You know, they have to want to be part of that change. You can't do the whole job for them. So the best you can do is to try to bring alive their own wish to do something better. It's like a person trying to give up smoking, you know. If they don't want to give up smoking, they're not going to even try, you know. The intention has to come before the action. So, you know, you can give people chances again, but then maybe you can move on to someone who is a little bit more sort of on the same wavelength as yourself. Ever heard of the Starfish project? So can you tell me about it? It might be called a project. Yes.
About the young man
Yes.
who was throwing the stars back in the ocean, and maybe I should let
No, it sounds about the same one.
Well, there was a young man who was walking by the beach, and he saw a young boy, and the young boy was throwing the starfish that had come out of the ocean and were on the shore. And
There were a lot of them.
there were a lot of them. So he was throwing the starfish back in the water, and the guy at Season thought it was really weird that he was doing that. He's like, you can't possibly save all of them. He's like, but even though you can't save all of them, you can help them. And so he was throwing a couple every day. He would go to the beach and throw some of them back in the ocean.
I think the punchline was,
Yeah.
what's the point of even trying? There's no way that's going to make any difference. But he says, but it does make the difference to the ones I can throw back in the water. Yeah. So the ones you do manage to help, it does make a difference, and therefore it was worth the effort. In the same way, the ones who you can help, even though you can't help everyone, but it does count for them. So yeah, remind yourself often that it's not everyone who is amenable to help. But you can only try. And the Buddhist way of looking at things is, even if they don't respond, you got good merits already from trying. Yeah, so you take that away from your side. Sometimes it may be hardest to help those who are close to us, harder than to help a complete stranger. For some reason, in Asian families, people seem to like be more like a team. So if one person in the family sort of likes to come to the temple, then everyone wants to go. But in the Western world, it's exactly the opposite. If one comes to the temple, all the others are become like enemies of the temple, and like, oh no, terrible place. No, we've got this weird family member who goes there. You know, we're never going there. No, well, maybe it depends. But yes, sometimes you try to encourage your parents, and your parents look at you like they're still looking at you like when you were a little boy or girl, with all your whining and scraping and silly habits and fads and fashions which are going to change in 2 weeks' time. So they never take anything you say seriously. So yeah, sometimes you need to wait a while. But in the end, one hopes that they would also sort of respond, but it may take a lot longer than for people who don't know your background quite as well, because they always remember when you weren't quite as genuine and earnest in your interest in all things good and wholesome. Sometimes you need to wait for the right time for a person to listen to what you are telling them. And often that time may be when they have fallen on hard times. They may be more ready to listen than when everything's going smoothly for them. There's a little story from Thailand about a particular doctor, one of the main hospitals in Bangkok. A lot of the medical students used to go to the temple, and they would support the ordination programs for their fellow students, and they would gather donations to enable those ordinations to be free for the students who joined them. So they'd go around all their teachers and staff and faculty in the hospital and say, well, you want to donate something for this ordination this year. And this particular doctor always said no and slammed the door in their face. And when it came to the appointed time of the year again, then they came knocking on the door, after the first round of insults and having things thrown at them and stuff. The doctor sort of put his hands on his hips and he's about to let loose with another bout of insults. And he thought, hey, that's something that wasn't there before. And he notices like some sort of growth on his kidney. And being a doctor who was a specialist in cancer, he thought, oh, and the color of his face changed completely. And even doctor, doctor cure thyself sort of thing. And he said, hang on, just wait there a moment. I'm going to go and get my wallet right away. So they came at just the right time that year. Yeah. Some things, times people open up for different reasons, but it's generally when they realize that they are not, they can't just, misfortune doesn't just happen to other people in the world. It can happen to everybody. So yes, people may be ready to listen to a certain thing when misfortune befalls them. With criticism, some people you have to leave them to make their own mistakes. And then when it happens, you can say, I told you so. But you can't say it until then, okay? But they need sort of proof. So sometimes this element of patience, waiting for the correct time, is also an important part of being a good friend. Yeah. So far so good? So we have a little bit of time left for some meditation. So do you want to walk up and down for 5 minutes? Yes, it seems to be the best part of the retreat. Walking meditation, I think it's called.